I came across some information from certain podcasters, certain people in the field of the Caitlin Clark department, connected the dots. And everything in this video, I will have to say, is alleged, but it is alarming. But it is not fact. It is alleged. Now, we know the Indiana Fever basketball team is owned by the Simon family. Now, we know Caitlin Clark, when they drafted Caitlin Clark, she was the biggest name in all of sports. She got drafted, boom, bow, Christy Size, y'all know the Olympic break, blah, 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 all that stuff happened. She got snubbed, big storyline. Now, what transpired in the second half of the season was that Christy Size came to the realization that she needed to run Caitlin's system and run through Caitlin. And guess what happened? They instantly started winning. And
they made the moment the Indiana Fever drafted Caitlin Clark. It was more than just a sports story. It was the birth of an empire. Overnight, ticket sales exploded into the stratosphere. Her jersey became the hottest item in all of basketball, shattering records before she even stepped on professional court. The Fever, a franchise once languishing in obscurity, were suddenly the center of the sports universe. This wasn't just a rookie. She was a financial revolution in sneakers, a cultural phenomenon that owner Herb Simon and his son Steven had just welcomed into their family business.
Caitlin Clark, when they drafted Caitlin Clark, she was the biggest name in all of sports. Coming out of Iowa, she was the hottest thing smoking. I said this yesterday, and I'll say this before. Caitlin Clark's trajectory was out of here. So, I mean, something like we never seen before. Her coming out of college, man. I've been here, I seen it. And it was just a remarkable feat just to see this young lady come from Iowa, do what she's able to do on a basketball.
Lurking beneath this golden opportunity was a brewing storm, one ignited by the very person hired to guide her, head coach Stephanie White. White arrived with a plan, a rigid basketball philosophy known as the motion offense.
But down, because that logo 3 Caitlin, we didn't have that logo 3 Caitlin no more. Logo 3 Caitlin.
A system built on structure and shared responsibility. It was a system that from day one was on a collision course with the very essence of what made Caitlin Clark a generational talent. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the drama shaking the foundations of the WNBA, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. We're about to expose a hidden war inside the Indiana Fever, and you won't want to miss what comes next. As the season began, fans immediately noticed something was wrong. The Caitlin Clark they watched dominated Iowa. The fearless shooter pulling up from the logo, the brilliant passer orchestrating chaos, was gone. In her place was a player confined, her creativity stripped away by a slow, methodical system that demanded she play a role, not unleash her genius. The ball was taken out her hands, her shot attempts dropped, and her once selected body language turned muted and frustrated.
From what I understand and what I was told, when Stephanie White was told this, she hit the roof because she didn't like it. And Steve Simon told her, you don't have to like it, but it's that way. Now, this is, from my understanding, this is a conversation that happened at the conclusion of the season.
It wasn't just the stats. It was the energy. The audacious passes that used to bring crowds to their feet were now replaced with safe, predictable plays. That iconic logo 3, a shot that became her signature and a symbol of a new era in basketball, was suddenly a rare sight. Analysts on national television began questioning the strategy, openly wondering why the team wasn't leveraging its most explosive weapon. Social media lit up with clips comparing her college highlights to her professional performances, side-by-side videos that painted a damning picture of a superstar being held back. Behind the scenes, the Simon family watched their billion-dollar investment being systematically neutralized. Even Simon, the owner's son, who operated in the background, this was more than a coaching disagreement. It was a branding catastrophe. Every game where Clark looked restrained was a missed business opportunity, a dip in merchandise sales, and a cooling of the white-hot buzz that surrounded the team. He saw the metrics, the declining engagement, the comments from disillusioned fans. This was a business, and the flagship product was being mismanaged right before their eyes. The initial excitement was curdling into concern, and the blame was being placed squarely on a system that seemed to prioritize philosophy over firepower. But then a shocking turnaround. Midway through the season, something shifted. Allegedly under pressure, the Fever began to abandon the strict motion offense and started running their system through Caitlin Clark. And guess what happened? They started winning. The team found a rhythm, clawed their way into contention, and ultimately secured a playoff spot for the first time in years. Clark was suddenly bringing the ball up the court with purpose, her head on a swivel, scanning the floor for opportunities. Those deep, demoralizing three-pointers started falling again. The assists, the no-look passes, the sheer chaos she instilled in opposing defenses. It all came flooding back. The team wasn't just winning, they were fun to watch again. The energy in the arena was electric, a direct reflection of the freedom their star player was finally being given. This success, however, didn't calm the waters. It exposed the fault lines. Reports suggest Stephen Simon was furious. He saw this dramatic U-turn as undeniable proof that White's initial system had been holding the team and their superstar back all along. All those early losses, the stagnant offense, the frustrated fans, all could have been avoided. Whispers emerged of a tense private meeting where Stephen confronted top executives Kelly Krokoff and Amberox and Coach White herself. The message was said to be brutal in its clarity. From here on out, this was Caitlin Clark's team. The experiment was over. The future of the franchise would be built around her unique talents, not in spite of them. When Stephanie White allegedly hit the roof in protest, arguing for her system and her authority, Stephen Simon's response was ice cold and final. You don't have to like it, but it's that way. It was a decree, not a discussion. The conflict over coaching philosophy was just a public layer. A much darker, more alarming battle was allegedly unfolding behind closed doors centered on Caitlin Clark's health. As the season wore on, Clark was visibly dealing with nagging injuries. She was seen limping at times, grimacing after hard falls, and her explosiveness seemed diminished. But according to insiders, the updates on her condition became inconsistent and vague. One day, the team would report she was day-to-day. The next, she would be listed as out for rest. Rumors swirled that the coaching staff was downplaying her discomfort, insisting she was fine to play in a desperate attempt to maintain control over the team's narrative and on-court strategy. The concern was that if Clark was officially deemed too injured to play, it would validate criticisms that the team was overworking her or not protecting her asset. Some sources even suggested there was pressure on the medical team to provide optimistic assessments. For Stephen Simon, this was a point of no return. Mishandling a player's health wasn't just a basketball mistake. It was a reckless endangerment of the franchise's most valuable asset and a direct threat to the Simon family's reputation. He reportedly viewed it as brand sabotage, where every cautious press conference and every restricted minute for Clark represented millions of dollars in lost momentum and goodwill. If Clark suffered a major long-term injury due to mismanagement, the fallout would be catastrophic, not just for the season, but for the legacy of the entire organization. The situation had escalated from a strategic disagreement to a profound ethical breach, and then the secret started to spill. The internal tension couldn't be contained within the Fever's front office anymore. Anonymous posts began appearing on fan forums and sports podcasts detailing the explosive arguments between Stephen Simon and Stephanie White. These weren't just random rumors. The leaks were specific, naming names, quoting lines from meetings, and pointing to internal timelines. It felt like someone on the inside was methodically exposing the rot within the organization. One post would detail the exact location of a heated argument. Another would quote a specific phrase used by an executive. This granular level of detail gave the rumors an undeniable weight. The narrative in the media flipped entirely. The story was no longer about Caitlin Clark's stardom. It was about her being failed by her own organization. Fans armed with this new information, united in outrage. Hashtags like #FreeCaitlin and #LetHerPlay began trending, a digital revolt against the coaching staff. The comments on the Fever's official social media post were flooded with angry emojis and demands for transparency. The Fever's public relations machine went into lockdown, issuing generic statement about team unity and focusing on the next game. But the silence only made the speculation roar louder. The more the organization clammed up, the more the outside world was convinced they had something to hide. Inside the organization, the atmosphere turned to ice. Stephanie White, once a confident leader, now found herself increasingly isolated. Insiders described staffers distancing themselves, emails going unanswered, and key meetings being held without her. It was a quiet, brutal form of exile. The locker room fractured with some players loyal to the coach's system and believing in a collective approach, while others were frustrated that their superstars' talents were being contained and that the internal drama was overshadowing their performance on the court. This divide created cliques and a palpable sense of unease. Players were careful about what they said and to whom, afraid of choosing the wrong side in a war they didn't start. Morale cratered. It was at this breaking point that Stephen Simon made his most powerful move yet. He allegedly called for an internal review demanding written reports in the coaching and medical staff about every single decision made regarding Clark's recovery. This wasn't a request. It was an inquisition. He wanted a paper trail, and everyone knew it. The message was clear. Someone was going to be held accountable for the chaos. This move sent a shock wave through the entire franchise, signaling that no one was safe from scrutiny and that the owner's son was now firmly in command, ready to clean house if necessary. For decades, the Simon name has been synonymous with two things in Indiana: unwavering loyalty and shrewd business acumen. Herb Simon, the family patriarch and a newly minute Hall of Famer, didn't just build a basketball team. He built an institution rooted in stability. He and his brother Mel purchased the Pacers in 1983 for $11 million, saving them from potential relocation and embedding them into the heart of Indianapolis for the long term. This was a legacy, not a flashy championships, but quiet, resilient stewardship for a man who had just received one of the sport's highest honors for his contributions. The public turmoil and allegations of internal dysfunction were more than just bad press. They were a direct stain on a lifetime's work. The narrative was shifting from Herb Simon, Hall of Famer, to Herb Simon, owner of a franchise in chaos. A devastating blow for a man whose reputation was his most valuable currency. Stephen Simon, operating for years in the background, was now forced into the spotlight. But he was no mere heir apparent. He was a distinct force with his own vision, a tech-oriented venture capitalist who would carve his own path in San Francisco. Stephen brought a modern, data-driven perspective to the family business. His passion wasn't just for basketball, but for the intersection of sports, technology, and community, evidenced by his key role in launching the Indianapolis-based Techstar Sports Accelerator, where Herb was a steady hand. Stephen was the innovator, constantly asking, how can we do better? This clash of philosophies was inevitable. Stephen saw the game through a 21st century lens where a player's brand power was a tangible asset to be maximized. The alleged mishandling of Caitlin Clark wasn't just a coaching misstep. In his eyes, it was a catastrophic failure to understand the modern sport economy. He wasn't just protecting a player. He was protecting the future valuation of the entire franchise. The stakes in this conflict were quantifiable, and they were enormous. The financial engine that Caitlin Clark had become for the Fever was no longer just a theory. It was a documented reality. The table below outlines a massive commercial impact that was potentially at risk due to internal turmoil, commercial metric impact, and value citation. Overall sponsorship revenue set to generate $19.71 million in 2025, at least 50% higher than any other WNBA team. Key sponsorship deals: patch deal with Eli Lilly, $5, $68 million per year, and front of shirt deal with Salesforce, $3, $05 million per year. Attendance and viewership averaged 17,036 fans per game in 2024, the highest in the WNBA, driving unprecedented national TV exposure. This